that just shows how close and how easy it is to ignite that racial tinderbox in the US.
Yeah.
He was a black American who was, looked upon highly, and to crush everybody's hopes, to change those thoughts in people's minds was, I think, too hard for the jury.
It has been a fascinating, and it's lasted for so many years, hasn't it? But he'll probably get to Florida anyway, they reckon. Jim, Guy Fawkes is an English Anglican anti-Catholic carnival. It's always been accused of sectarianism because it was the Catholics trying to blow up James I's Parliament, which has no place in modern Aotearoa. Full marks to Wellington City Council, says Graham. Before we go, just talking about nuts and bolts of... they're not unimportant stories, but we're only really after remarks from you. But an Air France A380 makes an emergency landing in Canada after an engine explodes in midair on a transatlantic flight. How many engines do you want on your plane on long flights like this?
Well, Jim, I had 4 on one plane and 2 of them caught fire, and I was very relieved. Well, even having 2 left did not feel particularly good, considering all you could feel was that plane just going down and down, just dropping. And as we limped our way back to Honolulu.
Can you dramatise these circumstances a bit more fully?
Well, I'd been on a flight. Do you remember the United Airlines, the fuselage, that one, that horrible?
Yes.
It was just after that, and it was still the same plane. It was the flight was the same.
Right.
You know what night is 81 weight or whatever it was. I left Honolulu with my daughter. We were about 20 minutes out, and I just happened to look out and notice sparks coming out from the engine on the far end.
Yeah.
And I thought, that doesn't look too hot. And then you saw flames, and the captain came along and said, look, don't panic. We've got a bit of a fire in the engine, but we're okay. We are going to turn the plane around. And then at that stage, the second engine caught on fire.
Lordy.
And I've got a window seat over the wing.
Really?
And you could just feel it going down. And you could see the twinkling lights of Honolulu, and I'm just thinking, come on, get this thing. That was the longest 15 minutes of my life going back to that place. But we had 2 others still ticking along.
That's a pretty good story, Julia.
I had a worse one than that, another
Okay.
near crash. But anyway, but I do long-haul flights, and maybe I shouldn't.
Airplanes defy logic a bit, though, don't they? How they get up in the air. I mean, those old 747s, and the thousands of hours they spend in the air between servicing.
I know.
It's incredible.
The trouble is our rational brains can work out why they're in the air, but there's a part of the brain, the ancient brain, that just doesn't believe it.
No.
Yeah. But they fly quite well on one engine, and evidently failures like this are rare. But does it ever... So whenever you cross a big ocean, you must...
Oh, I freak. Look, I'm a terrible flyer anyway at the best of time, but a turbulence, and I'm trying to act cool, but my book's upside down and I'm hanging on for grim life. But I still do it because I figure, look, if your number's up, it's up.
That whole safety briefing is, I mean,
it's
how
a waste
much
of
use
time.
is it? It's just to make us feel at peace and happy that we're taking off and this big steel bird will get into the air.
Well, it explains things like the emergency lighting on the floor.
Can I just say
this,
Jim?
In case you mistake it for some kind of,
On Air New Zealand, it makes a lot of money for celebrities.
Yeah, that's right. It certainly does. Sorry, you were going to say something.
I used to fly horses to Singapore, to Hong Kong, and they just told us, forget the safety. It's never going to save you.
Julia Hartley-Moore and Mike Rehu on that cheerful note. Thank you both. And that's the panel for another day.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, 5 people, including 2 children, are in hospital following a fire at a derelict bar in Hastings. We're still getting news on this. We will have the latest live. Bill English calls Winston Peters. Winston Peters doesn't answer. Winston Peters calls Bill English back. Jacinda Ardern calls Winston Peters. Let the merry-go-round of coalition phone calls commence. We have new figures on DHB debt levels and the kind of pressure some DHBs feel under financially. Also tonight, evacuation centres are at capacity and food and water are running out as evacuees from the Vanuatu island of Ombai try and find somewhere to go. We have a fascinating cross to a correspondent there and much, much more. Stay with us. Checkpoint is next.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. A witness has described rescuing screaming children from a fire inside a derelict building in Hastings this afternoon. The witness says rescuers had to use a ladder to get into a former bar and remove a grate in order to enter the building and save the two children. One child was extremely badly burned, according to the traumatised witness, who didn't wish to comment any further. Central Fire Shift Commander Mike Wanoa says 7 crews tackled the fire in the suburb of St Leonards.
One person has suffered serious burns and one not so serious. Both of these victims were young people. We believe that these two were rescued by workers from an adjoining building. 3 of these rescuers were also transported to hospital with smoke inhalation.
Mike Wanoa says the fire is now out and investigators are trying to determine the cause. A coroner has criticised the Ministry of Social Development for the way it dealt with a woman who committed suicide after being sent a prosecution letter. Wendy Shoebridge died in April 2011, 4 days after the letter came saying she'd been overpaid $22,000. In her findings, Coroner Anna Tutton says the ministry was not advised Ms Shoebridge was at risk of suicide before deciding to prosecute. She's also found that the ministry wouldn't necessarily have prosecuted just because it believed fraud had occurred. Ms Tutton recommends the ministry clarify its test for prosecuting beneficiaries and says staff should be made aware of the relevant guidelines. New Zealand First will likely start preliminary discussions about the next government with both National and Labour on Thursday. However, its leader, Winston Peters, is reiterating that the real talks won't start until after the final election result is revealed on Saturday afternoon. Both major party leaders spoke by phone this morning to Mr Peters, who's given himself just 5 days after Saturday to make a final decision. National's Bill English says the deadline looks tight and any preliminary talks will speed up the negotiation process. Labour's Jacinda Ardern says it's important to wait for the special votes to be revealed. Fuji Xerox has vowed to regain trust and rebuild its reputation in the market. The company has been suspended from dealing with government agencies and barred from taking on new government contracts. An investigation into irregular accounting earlier this year uncovered losses of $500 million at Fuji Xerox New Zealand and its Australian partner. Andrew McRae reports.
The company's been told what it must do to have the ban lifted, but the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment won't make the details public. Fuji Xerox says it wants to work with the government again and has made widespread governance and management changes over the past 18 months. It says the changes are a big step towards rebuilding its reputation and it's taking this very seriously. The ban doesn't affect other customers. Ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
An inquest has heard the officer who fired the shots that killed an unarmed man believed he himself was going to be shot. David Chervin had money troubles and was wanted for aggravated robbery when he called the police and told them to come and get him in Auckland's Myers Park on a night in August 2015. Detective Sergeant Andrew Saunders told the Auckland District Court today that when unarmed officers arrived, Mr Chervin told them he had a gun. They retreated before armed officers arrived and demanded he get on the ground. One of them fired 5 shots after Mr Chervin turned towards him with his arms outstretched and holding something black that looked like a pistol. Another officer fired 3 shots, all of which missed. The inquest will reconvene in December to hear from 2 further witnesses. It's 5:04. To sport, and the New Zealand Women's Golf Open champion, Brooke Henderson, says she surprised herself with how well she played the last couple of days. The 20-year-old Canadian scored a 5-shot victory in the Auckland tournament, which ran into a 5th day today after wild weather caused a suspension yesterday. She says the conditions were the toughest she's ever encountered on tour.
Between the wind and the rain and then all of the different delays and how long it took us to play 18 holes of golf, it's been really long and I feel like mentally draining a little bit, but definitely I'm still pretty high on adrenaline right now, knowing that this trophy is mine and, you know, being able to win for my 5th time out in the LPGA Tour is really cool.
Brooke Henderson. Lydia Ko finished tied for 22nd, 12 shots back. Rowing New Zealand is happy with the start of its new Olympic cycle, having won 3 gold medals and 7 medals overall at the World Championships in Florida. New Zealand finished second on the medal table behind Italy, winning the same number of gold medals as them and Australia. The squad is now without some of the stars in recent years, and high performance director Alan Cotter says the rest of the athletes are now stepping up.
It's good to see the young athletes that have been in the program a little while coming through the development program, now getting success at the elite level.
Alan Cotter of Rowing New Zealand, and that's the news.
Email privacy issues at Horowhenua District Council.
So this is a backside covering exercise?
Absolutely, and not a very good one, with 2 play.
Spanish police shut down the independence referendum in Catalonia.
Today we had a day of chaos and confusion.
And we're no closer to a new coalition at home.
Well, I gave him a call yesterday, didn't get a response.
Don't miss it. Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a global employment expert argues for more flexibility and freer migration to help economies cope with the changing world of work. And after 10, life on Muzzle Station. Farmer Fiona Redfern on the challenges and joys living on New Zealand's most isolated high country station. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Vanuatu, including Coromandel, Taupo, Taumarunui and Taihape. Fine spells and a few showers. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Long fine spells, isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings, mainly inland. Westerly gales about southern Hawke's Bay and the Taradua district easing tonight. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wellington, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, North and Central Otago. Fine weather. Bulla and northern Westland, occasional showers, easing later tomorrow. Southern Westland, a few showers tonight or early tomorrow morning, then fine apart from the odd shower about the ranges. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland. Showers becoming confined to Fiordland and coastal Southland by evening and becoming mostly fine elsewhere. Westerly gales about the coast easing this afternoon, and the Chatham Islands occasional showers. At 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. Welcome everyone. Coming up, a pretty extraordinary phone conversation with our correspondent in Vanuatu. We were speaking to him at the camp that people are being evacuated to, and you could hear the sounds of consternation, exasperation and distress behind him. We'll have that. We've also got some new figures on DHB deficits and some new insight into the financial pressure that they feel they are under coming up. But we're going to go live now to Hawke's Bay, this developing story there. Our correspondent Peter Fowler is on the way to the scene. In fact, he's at the scene and he's getting more information about this fire. 2 children are in hospital. One of them is in critical condition after a fire at a derelict building in Hastings this afternoon. Now, the fire broke out, as Katrina told you at the top of the news, at a former bar in the suburb of St Leonard's about 2:30 this afternoon. It's believed 2, possibly more children were inside. Rescuers went in to save them. Our reporter Emile Donovan has been making calls on the fire and joins us now from our Wellington newsroom. Peter Fowler is also at the scene. Emile, what can you tell us?
Well, John, official information is still very thin on the ground, but from the witnesses and the people in the area that I've spoken to, 3 local men who work at a business around the corner from the bar saw smoke coming from the fire, obviously, and heard the sounds of children screaming. They've run to the location of the fire. They've realised that they'll need a ladder to get into the building in order to rescue these children. They've gone and gotten a ladder. They've ripped open a grate in order to get in there. And they've gone in and they have rescued these children. At least they've taken them out. These men are now in hospital being treated for smoke. Well, at least were in hospital being treated for smoke inhalation. Now, I have spoken to one of these men. He did not wish to be named. He was absolutely traumatised. He described the child that he helped as being very severely burned and was in a real state, understandably.
Yeah, I can well imagine. We've been making calls from up here, and as I say, Peter Fowler's at the scene. We understand one of the men was from a local car yard, a local car dealer, and Emil, 2 or 3 construction workers also involved. The fire department say they had 6 appliances with 30 crews, so this was a big fire when it was burning at full height.
By all accounts, it was a big fire. Interestingly, we've actually been told by witnesses that this place, the place where the fire was, it's not the first fire that there's been there in the past few years. Apparently, earlier last year, it was also cordoned off because there was a fire there. So there will certainly be something to come out of that.
Emil Donovan, thank you so much. Emil with the latest. Peter Fowler's at the scene and we'll talk to him the moment he can give us more information. It was at a bar, a former bar in the suburb of St Leonard's, about 2:30 this afternoon. Fire appliances got there, we think, about 2:50 or 3 o'clock, by which stage the rescue had already been undertaken. 3 of the rescuers have been in hospital for smoke inhalation. We don't think their conditions are serious. We will update you on the conditions of the children the moment we know more. It's 11 minutes past 5. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint on RNZ. We turn now to the mass evacuation in Vanuatu and to the increasingly large number of evacuees from the risk of volcanic eruption on the island of Ombai, who are arriving on a neighbouring island that simply doesn't seem to have the facilities to cope. The extent of the pressure that very scarce resources are under became apparent today when we called our correspondent in one of the evacuation centres. As the number of likely evacuees increases from the initial projections of about 11,000 to somewhere nearer 15,000 people, RNZ Pacific reporter Koroi Williams was at a camp on Espiritu Santo. We asked him to describe what was happening as more and more evacuees were arriving behind him.
Just looking around, this is a massive sort of a sports field, and there's just people's luggage just strewn everywhere in the sun, and people just finding shade wherever they can, but there's not much around. I'm burning here.
And Koroi, it sounds like there's someone on a loud hailer or something behind you as they're speaking to everyone. Do you know what that person's saying?
I think they're trying to organise. There's people here doing all sorts of stuff. There's people cutting firewood, people trying to put up little bits of tarpaulin to get more shade. So right now he's talking about water. So he's telling people where they can go to get water. Because seriously, like with this sun, people are definitely going to need water. I think there's been 3 different water points set up. It looks like a football field on one side, so there must be changing rooms there that people are allowed to use, and then the school on the other side. So I think they're just telling people that that's where they need to go if they want to have a wash or get something to drink.
It's pretty rudimentary stuff, isn't it? And this isn't me having a go at Vanuatu. The evacuation is going pretty successfully, so they're getting people away from danger. The problem is that the infrastructure at the receiving end that is meant to cope with them just isn't able to cope with the numbers, right? And this is in a country devastated by Cyclone Pam, so they really are up against it, are they, Koroi?
They are. I spoke with the provincial authorities, and even they're a bit frustrated because the National Disaster Management Office had promised them funding to help support them with receiving all these people, and they told me this morning that hasn't come through, and they've been just running on their own steam. They're even getting fuel on credit from local businesses to run their trucks to move people around. So it's quite a tense situation here. I think.
Sorry, Koroi, can I just interrupt? They're having to get fuel on credit from local businesses to run the evacuees around.
Yes, that's right, and even trucks. I think they're asking people to loan them their trucks. They asked for 20 more today because there's 5,000 people. The local government here, I think everybody's all hands on deck. No one's in the offices. Everybody's trying to organise people here. So they're to capacity.
Any NGOs there? Are you seeing any aid agencies working where you are now, Koroi?
There's a few people with vests on, but I think they're local provincial authorities. I've spoken with the Red Cross here and Save the Children, and everybody's in agreement, including the provincial authorities, that they just need tents. Like they don't need tarps, they don't need shelter kits like for the cyclones. They just need big tents that they can set up. They've got heaps of land lots of land to put people on. They just got no shelter. And thank goodness it's the dry season. It's not raining, but even that, like it's scorching heat. People are just. I just came from another camp where I tried to get people to talk to us, and someone had fainted in a hut there, and they were trying to get him out to go to hospital. So obviously conditions coming over on a boat, being set up in a place scorching hot, but limited food and water. It's not a good thing, eh?
Karoy, is there anyone near you from Mumbai that we can talk to who speaks English? Is there anyone around that we can snaffle that you're standing nearby, or is it easier said than done?
Yeah, I did line up a guy to speak with us, but he's been pulled away by the crowd. I found the same problem in the other centre I went to. They have quite a sort of a social system here, so everybody speaks community, so people have to talk to like committees before they talk to us and all that sort of thing.
Right.
So it's quite organised. But I'll just see. I've spoken to this man, John. So I'll just walk over and see if he's happy to speak with us.
Thank you so much, Karoy. Karoy Hawkins, who is with RNZ International, who do a stunning job covering the Pacific. As you can hear, he is up in an evacuation centre that is simply not equipped to cope with the people who are coming from Mumbai. He's trying to get one of those people now to talk to us.
And John's just telling me that he needs to speak to the leader of the group, Father William, before he can speak to you.
Does he need permission, Karoy?
Yes, I'm just talking now to Father William. Migat online, migat media man blo New Zealand. Yes. Hem like photo man lo campo but English not na situation be pala. Hem no saya Islam hem like photo with anyone hem say English.
I'm just going to speak very quietly, but you can actually hear Karoy speaking pidgin now, which is one of the joys of these brilliant Rinzi correspondents trying to get permission for John, who's from Mumbai and speaks English, to talk to us.
Okay, I'm passing Kamli. So I'm just passing you over now to Nimblisa.
Thank you.
Father William, and with you. Are you speaking with John?
Thank you very much, Karoy. Thank you. I so appreciate it. Father William, hello. It's John Campbell from Radio New Zealand. Are you there?
Yes.
Hello. Thank you so much for your time. Are you coping? Do you have enough support, enough resources, enough food, enough water, enough tents to look after all the people who are coming to you?
At the moment, we have, in our camp, we have 1,008 people at the moment in this camp, Sapi camp. And we don't have enough food. We don't have enough tent. And a lot of children outside in the sun because they don't have tent or camps to live in. And we don't have enough water also. It's one of our problems.
So you don't have enough food, water or tents, and more people are arriving. How many people did you say you have there now?
At the moment, we have 1,009 people. 1,009 people at the moment.
And are you expecting you will get more?
Yeah, we're expecting about 5,000 people today.
And can you cope with that many people?
Yes, there's so many people, and so we cannot cope with so many people here because there are lots of people, and yet still to be coming.
So you've got 1,000 now, and you're struggling to cope. Did you say you're going to have 5,000 in total?
Yeah. And they are, unfortunately, they are about four to five camps here. And one of our camps here is Sapi camp.
Yeah.
And we have about, unfortunately, 1,009 people. And we are expecting today 5,000 still to become.
And so you desperately need help, do you, to cope with all those people?
Yeah, we need help. We need so much help.
We need help. We need so much help. That's Father William talking to me from one of the camps. Before that, Karoy Hawkins, who of course is a RNZ Pacific reporter who's gone up to cover the evacuation, a desperate need for support from aid agencies and governments as this unfolds. It's 90 minutes past 5. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has spoken directly to the leaders of both National and Labour for the first time since the election, laying the groundwork for talks to form a coalition government. if that can indeed be achieved. Nationals Bill English had left a phone message for Mr Peters last night suggesting the two talk this week, but didn't immediately receive a response. Phone tag, here's our political reporter, May Heron.
Winston Peters says the real talks will get underway after the final election result is announced next Saturday afternoon. But he says preliminary discussions with National leader Bill English and Labour leader Jacinda Ardern will get underway later this week.
You know, we have had a contact from Bill English requesting I call him back. I have. I've been talking to other political parties about preliminary talks because of the complication that can't start till Thursday. We have our caucus on Tuesday. And I have a funeral which I must attend on Wednesday, so we expect that by Thursday discussions will be underway.
Jacinda Ardern also spoke to Mr Peters this morning and says there will likely be a meeting between the two parties later this week. She reiterated the importance of waiting for the result of more than 380,000 special votes. Those special votes and the final election result will be announced on Saturday, and Mr Peters says he will make his decision in the 5 days following, by October the 12th. Bill English says his concern is that the deadline looks pretty tight.
We've done 3 coalition agreements, the last 3 the New Zealand government's had, and they've all been different. This one will be different again. The negotiation process is quite a bit more complex, and trying to get through that in 4 or 5 days would be quite a challenge. So some preliminary discussion this week would help. Certainly we'll be preparing for that.
There's been some speculation that National are open to a deal with the Green Party, something the Greens have in the past ruled out several times. Here's Mr English's take on it.
The Greens have yet to indicate, I think, that they would seriously intend to negotiate. There's been a lot of public discussion about it, about the possibility, but their track record, I think, is pretty clear. And there'd be, I think, certainly some doubt in our minds that they're willing and able to shift ground to seriously contemplate being part of a government.
The Green Party is not commenting. It won't say whether it has had any contact with New Zealand First, National or even with the Labour Party. From Parliament for Checkpoint, May Heron.
The Labour Party's health spokesperson has told Checkpoint the country's district health boards are in revolt as the financial pressure they're under reaches boiling point. David Clark was responding to the latest revelation in Checkpoint's ongoing investigation into the financial health of the country's DHBs. On Friday, the county's Manukau DHB told us they're facing a $20 million deficit for the 17-18 financial year. Today, the DHB told us in writing that deficit would have been $50 million were it not for a $30 million savings program that, quote, is not easy, is putting pressure on us and involves risk. County's Manukau is the latest in an increasingly long line of DHBs to tell us, both on the record and off it, of the financial pressures they're under. David Clark says it's unprecedented for DHBs to talk like that in public. More on that in a moment, but first the figures. We start with what the CEO of County's Manukau told us on Checkpoint on Friday night.
Oh, if you mean, are we short of funds? Yes, we are. We've certainly got to be able to figure out a way of being able to fund an expansion of our clinical workforce, and we're doing that at a time when we are actually in deficit. So that's challenging.
How much are you in deficit?
So we ended last year with a deficit of about $12.9 million.
And your projections and your annual plan for this fiscal year, 17-18?
$20 million deficit.
That's Dr. Gloria Johnson speaking on Checkpoint on Friday night. That interview is available online. As you heard, the projected figure she left us with was a
$20 million deficit.
That's one DHB. They keep adding up. In the 2 months that Checkpoint has been covering the country's 20 DHBs and their financial positions, the overall picture has changed dramatically. This is what the Minister told us when we asked for a figure on August 11.
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I mean, the last one I've seen was somewhere between 50 and 100 million, but look, I just have to go and check the figures. I think the last one might have been 64 million. Somewhere between 50 and 100 million, perhaps 64 million. A fortnight later on Checkpoint. I mean, look, we've got deficits for the coming year, 117 million across the district health boards.
117 million, and now we understand that figure is higher still. In short, the projected figure is now more than double what the current figure was less than 2 months ago, and heading up. That's the combined figure for all 20 DHBs. But remember, Counties Manukau alone is projecting a
$20 million deficit.
And that's a best-case scenario. Here's what's harder to quantify. The projections we're getting include targeted cost savings and efficiencies, as we reported with the Waikato DHB at the end of August. Their initial deficit projection was
32, I think, would have been the figure.
That's million, 32 million. That draft budget was submitted to the ministry, and as Waikato DHB chairman Bob Simcock told us, the ministry returned it to sender.
There was a clear indication that we're expected to meet our normal obligations, which is to live within our means.
So a draft deficit of $32 million became zero or something close to it.
Our intention is to deliver a break-even budget to the government. Clearly our initial work through the budget identifies significant pressures, but we will be presenting a break-even budget.
But how? Savings, efficiencies. Another board member, Dave McPherson, told us
the reality is that our staff are being told to find savings that they just can't possibly achieve. So that puts pressure on them, which then puts pressure on us.
So when on Friday, Gloria Johnson told us Counties Manukau now has a projected deficit of $20 million, we wanted to know, was that before or after the savings and efficiencies DHBs are clearly being asked to achieve? It's after. I emailed Gloria Johnson today. Question, is the projected deficit figure of $20 million after efficiencies and savings? Answer, the $20 million deficit budget for 17-18 includes delivery of a $30 million savings program, i.e. without the savings program, the deficit would be $50 million. Question, is it going to be easy to achieve those savings? Answer, no, it's not easy. It's putting pressure on us and involves risk.
I think there's been extraordinary political pressure on the DHBs. They have been told that they must achieve the financial results that the government wants.
That's David Clark, Labour's health spokesperson. I called him today after Counties Manukau gave us the $50 million deficit figure, reduced to $20 million by a savings program the DHB told us in writing is putting pressure on them and involves risk. Over the past 2 months, Checkpoint has been told of pressures in Waikato, in Northland, in Auckland, in Canterbury, in the Southern DHB and elsewhere. In short, Counties Manukau isn't alone, it's just the latest DHB to tell us about it.
Every DHB chief executive is under pressure.
We can't confirm every because some DHBs simply won't talk to us. But the list of those who do talk of the pressure is growing, like Capital and Coast DHB, Wellington, in an internal document obtained by Checkpoint which said, quite matter-of-factly,
the DHB is facing significant financial pressures and has been challenged over a long period of time to achieve better financial outcomes.
That was in May in Wellington, our third largest city. In July, in our second largest city, the Canterbury DHB warned that addressing its financial pressures may force it to make
significant service cuts of unprecedented scale.
And today, Counties Manukau has told us getting its deficit down from $50 million to $20 million won't be easy and, quote, is putting pressure on us and involves risk.
I think what we're seeing, which is unusual and, as far as I'm aware, unprecedented, is an actual revolt by the DHBs. The pressure has reached boiling point. They are concerned for their own staff and at times have shown themselves willing to fall on their swords if need be as chief executives because they are worried about clinical safety, about short staffing, and they realise that now they can't continue without funding increases. Of course there are always going to be efficiency gains and of course there are always going to be new technologies, but they have concerns, which I think are legitimate, about safe staffing levels, and they've shown themselves as prepared to take on the minister and challenge the minister and the ministry because they are so worried about the situation they find themselves in.
Labour's health spokesperson David Clark. So we went to the ministry to ask them what savings targets DHBs are setting to reach their agreed budget targets. They replied by email, the Ministry of Health expects DHBs to ensure they are spending public funds as effectively and efficiently as possible for their populations and that these are key considerations when determining their budgets for the year. The DHB annual planning process is currently in progress and plans including budgets are made available on individual DHB websites. once approved. 29 minutes past 5, some sport. Organisers of the New Zealand Women's Golf Open are questioning whether it should be moved to February after the spring weather played havoc on what was supposed to be the final day of the tournament. The 72-hole tournament, normally played over 4 days, had to be extended to 5 days after severe winds and rain lashed the Windross Farm course yesterday. And as Matt Chatterton reports, even the tournament's winner, Brooke Henderson, says it was the worst weather she's ever played in.
The conditions on the first 3 days of the tournament next to Ardmore Airport were near perfect, but the weather packed it in on Sunday. Heavy wind and rain was the only winner yesterday. Organisers forced to call off play and finish the tournament today, an anomaly in professional golf standards. Before the tournament even begun, the LPGA had suggested moving the event to February to miss Auckland's notoriously unpredictable spring weather. Now they'll spend the next 2 months deciding whether that'll be the right move. Tournament director Michael Goldstein says despite the way it finished, he wouldn't have done it any other way.
Obviously it meant that our team had to scramble a lot, and it has a lot of effects on the tournament operations, but I think that it's really maintained the integrity, and we've come away today with a fantastic champion. So I'm happy with how it's all played out.
Goldstein was backed up by host world number 8 Lydia Ko, who wouldn't answer questions today about her 22nd placing in the tournament, but was happy to talk about the weather.
The LPGA and everybody involved, the sponsors, they want to do it the best that is most fair for every player, everyone in the field, and that's all you can do, and you just have to go with it. And it was definitely tough being out here, waking up at 5:30 and then not being able to play the full round. But you have to do it. It is part of what we do.
It wasn't a good week for Ko. Many pundits were predicting this week would be her best chance to break her 15-month winless drought on the LPGA Tour. While never at the top of the leaderboard, Ko was always in contention right up until her final 2 holes, finishing with a double bogey and triple bogey, falling back into a tie for 22nd at 5 under. She was 12 shots behind the runaway winner, Canadian Brooke Henderson, who played the best golf all week despite stating links golf isn't her favourite.
This is so amazing to get my first win outside of North America, my 5th win out on the LPGA Tour. It's really incredible. Dream come true, to win out here and to do it in New Zealand, which I'm really excited to be here, and we're going to go down to Queenstown and go and celebrate.
Henderson even admitted yesterday's conditions were the worst she's ever played in.
Between the wind and the rain and then all of the different delays and how long it took us to play 18 holes of golf. We teed off, I don't even remember, yesterday morning at some point and we finished right now. So it's been really long and I feel like mentally draining a little bit.
The $270,000 paycheck should go a little way to putting a smile back on the 20-year-old's face. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
Coming up on Checkpoint, relief teachers cry foul at having to pay $4,000 for a university course to stay in the classroom. Authorities warn of a humanitarian disaster looming in Puerto Rico as food, fuel and drinking water runs out. Giles, actually I don't know who was Giles or Jonathan doing business. Jonathan Mitchell, sorry, Jonathan is doing business next. But with the time at 27 minutes to 6, here's Katrina with the headlines.
A witness has described rescuing screaming children from a fire inside a derelict building in Hastings this afternoon. 3 local men who saw smoke and heard the children used a ladder to get into the former bar to save the 2 children. One child was extremely badly burned, according to the traumatised witness, who didn't wish to comment any further. Central Fire Shift Commander Mike Wanoa says 7 crews tackled the blaze in the suburb of St Leonards. He says the rescuers were taken to hospital to be treated for smoke inhalation. The fire is now out and investigators are trying to determine the cause. Food, water and tents desperately needed. That's the plea from a priest at one of the evacuation centres for people from a Vanuatu island where a volcano is erupting. Father William told Checkpoint 1,000 evacuees have arrived so far today at the centre on the island of Santo, and he's expecting 5,000. He says a lot of people are out in the sun without shelter. A coroner has criticised the Ministry of Social Development for the way it dealt with a woman who committed suicide after being sent a prosecution letter. Wendy Shoebridge died in April 2011, 4 days after the letter came saying she'd been overpaid $22,000. New Zealand First will likely start preliminary discussions about the next government with both National and Labour on Thursday. However, its leader, Winston Peters, is reiterating that the real talks won't start until after the final election results is revealed on Saturday afternoon. An inquest has heard the officer who fired the shots that killed an unarmed man believed he himself was going to be shot. David Chervin had money troubles and was wanted for aggravated robbery when he called the police and told them to come and get him in Auckland's Myers Park on a night in August 2015. Those are the headlines. I'm back with more news, sport and weather at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Just a reminder, our reporter Peter Fowler is at the scene of the fire in Hastings, and we will have the latest from him shortly. Turning to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell, who is beaming in this week from Wellington. Thank you for being with us, Jono. Hybrid vehicles slowly making their way into business fleets, I hear.
That's right. The message really from those who currently have them is go out and buy them now. Now, the current people who own them are really private buyers, so businesses are really just coming on board with this idea. There is interest from businesses and commercial sectors, councils, local government agencies and the like. In New Zealand, you'll remember maybe last year, they spent quite a bit of money, made quite a big investment in buying hybrid vehicles. Sales of these types of vehicles are rising off a fairly low base. So far this year, about 1,400 have been sold. So that really, the usual traditional combustion engines really trumpeting at the moment. But over time, it's expected to rise. There's more new models coming on the market. That's only going to rise and possibly will benefit commercial businesses who may need a new model with bigger space. But the owners of the current ones say the economics do stack up, might be more expensive at the outset, but over time, the cost to run these will be lower. And the infrastructure is continuing to be built around the country as well. This is the charge stations and the like. But the message really is to businesses, do consider these, go electric and you'll reap the benefits.
Business sentiment survey out tomorrow, Jono. Why is this important?
This is the well-regarded quarterly survey of business opinion. Last time it did hold steady. The building sector, the mood there had fallen. Services was up along with manufacturers. What's going to be interesting about this one, though, is it's the September quarter, so it will take into account the general election, and it will be interesting to see whether businesses' mood has deteriorated because of the election outcome and their business outlook may be diminished. So that will be interesting to watch. Also, whether the skills shortage is continuing to bite into businesses, whether they're holding off from hiring more staff. One thing is likely, though, like everyone else, the Institute of Economic Research is likely to stick with the message that the Reserve Bank will be on hold for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. What the markets do today, it seemed like quite a quiet day today, was it, Jono?
Yeah, I think it suffered a bit of Monday-itis, I think. Yeah. Fell a point to end at 7,929, and that Kiwi dollar 72 US cents and 92 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell joining us live from the Wellington newsroom. Thank you so much. David Chervin had money troubles and was wanted for 3 aggravated robberies when he was fatally shot by police in Auckland's Myers Park, not terribly far from us here. Today, Coroner Catherine Gregg opened an inquest into the 21-year-old's death at the Auckland District Court. Our court reporter Edward Gay was there, and Edward filed this report.
Shots fired, shots fired. Comms copies.
David Chervin had been in the country only 5 months when his life came to a tragic end. The Slovak man had taken out a €24,000 loan to travel with his girlfriend Eva Vovova. Detective Sergeant Andrew Saunders told the inquest that once in New Zealand, Mr Chervin worked for construction companies and confided with friends and colleagues that he was stressed about money. The senior detective said Mr Chervin told different stories to various people, including his boss, Ken McKenzie.
He also told Mr McKenzie that he was in the Iraq War and was part of the American Foreign Legion, and that his kneecap got shot while on a mission.
Mr Chervin said the army had refused to pay for his surgery, so his mother had taken out a mortgage and he was now trying to pay her back. When he later resigned, he told Mr McKenzie he was returning to Iraq to make more money.
He also said that his Russian sergeant had been sending him code emails that he had to go to a meeting place in Seattle before going back to Iraq.
He later told a Tinder date that he had been a sniper and another work colleague that his knee had been injured in a knife fight. Meanwhile, back at home, Mr Chervin's mother had found out about the loan and was offering to help him pay it back. During Skype conversations, Mr Chervin told her not to talk about it to anyone.
Mr Chervin stated that the loan was too much, quoting €30,000, and stated that his life was ruined.
Mr Chervin also told his mother that he'd committed insurance fraud and could never return to Slovakia. Detective Sergeant Saunders said Chervin then robbed 2 liquor stores and a dairy on the North Shore, armed with a knife. The dairy robbery ended with a struggle with the owner, and Mr Chervin left behind a bag with his passport and driver's licence inside. It didn't take long for the police to put out a media release with his name and photo attached. He confessed to Miss Vivova before running away from her, and in the next 3 hours the couple sent over 100 texts to each other. One from Mr Chervin included this.
Evka, every minute with you is something amazing. I am grateful to God that I had a girl like you. It's no longer working.
Miss Vivova texted him to say she was dying of fear. Friends Murray and Judith Steedman were also worried.
Judith Steedman was concerned that David might try and get the police to kill him, as he was Catholic, and she believed that he would not commit suicide.
Mr Chervin headed to Myers Park in Auckland's CBD. He was spotted by a man walking his dog as he paced to and fro, appearing agitated. But it was Mr Chervin who called the police, telling them he was wanted for an armed robbery, but that they had the wrong man. He pleaded with them to come and get him. Mr Saunders said police responded and the initial officers were unarmed and retreated once Mr Chervin told them he had a gun. Armed officers told Mr Chervin to get on the ground, but Mr Chervin responded by quickly bringing his hands out of his pockets.
Officer 16 continued to move and saw a black object in Mr Chervin's right hand. According to Officer 16, the black object looked like the receiver of a pistol, and he believed that he was about to be shot by Mr Chervin. Officer 16 then switched the safety selector on the firearm to fire and pulled the trigger.
A second armed officer, known only as Officer 12, also fired 3 shots. Of the 8 shots fired by both officers, 2 hit Mr Chervin, 2 others hit trees, and 1 was found in the wall of a nearby apartment building. The whereabouts of the other shots are unknown. The fatal shot hit a main artery in Mr Chervin's abdomen and he died at the scene. His black cell phone was found near his head. Mr Saunders said there was a criminal investigation, but after getting legal advice, no charges were laid against officers. Coroner Catherine Greig said she would be looking at whether Mr Chervin's death was self-inflicted and if he had provoked the police. She'll also examine the actions of the police. The police are represented at the proceedings, as are the individual officers. No lawyer is present for Mr Chervin. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gay ahau.
Experienced relief teachers are leaving the classroom because of Education Council requirements. They update their training. Teachers who do not get full registration within 6 years of finishing their training must complete an in-school induction program or a $4,000 university course if they want to keep working. Relievers in their 60s say the course is not relevant for people who don't want a permanent teaching job, and the rules ignore their decades of experience in the classroom. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, filed this report.
Sue Evans is 64 years old. She taught in England for 15 years and since moving to New Zealand in 2008 has been relieving for her local secondary school.
I did quite a bit of science. I also did some long-term in physical education where I had to do some exams and again write reports. I was in, I would say, an average of 3 to 4 days a week.
Crikey, so you're certainly in demand.
Yes, because I was a very good teacher.
But without full registration, Mrs. Evans has to do a $4,000 refresher course if she wants to continue teaching. She says it's not worth it, and the rule makes no sense because as a long-term reliever, she got plenty of training while she was working at the school.
There's a shortage of teachers, and yet they're not taken into consideration people like me who've got a lot of experience and done a lot of work here.
A 68-year-old teacher affected by the change told RNZ News that he is doing the course because he enjoys relief teaching. But the man, who asked not to be named, says he's been relieving for 17 years and teachers with a lot of experience should not have to do the course.
Yeah, it's crazy. And there's a teacher shortage and they're trying to think of ways to get new teachers. Well, why don't they just retain the old experienced teachers who have got all these years of experience and are doing a good job? That's what I can't understand.
Leslie Hoskin from the Education Council says teachers can now do an in-school induction and mentoring program instead of the $4,000 refresher course. Either way, however, she says the aim is to ensure all teachers, including relief teachers, are fully certified.
To ensure that we've got high-quality teachers in front of our students all day, every day, so whether you're relief teaching, a part-time teacher or a full-time teacher, the premise of both of those programs is to support all teachers on provisional certificates move towards their full practicing certificate.
Mrs Hoskin says the in-school program is good for relievers and it takes account of their classroom experience.
They're exactly the teacher we want to keep in the school system. We take those years, if you like, or months or whatever it is, and we attribute it towards their program. The mentor with the teacher and a leader, so a principal or an early childhood centre leader, then works to design a fit-for-purpose program designed to them.
Leslie Hoskin says about 300 teachers a year need to do a refresher course or in-school program if they want to continue teaching. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
A humanitarian disaster is looming in Puerto Rico as food, fuel and drinking water runs out following the largest hurricane to hit the area in almost a century. Almost 2 weeks after Hurricane Maria devastated the island, more than 3.5 million Puerto Ricans are still without power, and authorities are warning it could be weeks before schools reopen, electricity and cell phone towers are restored and life begins to resume anything like normalcy. Zach Fleming reports.
Desperate scenes in Puerto Rico as food, water and cash runs out. Hundreds of people lined up outside this Walgreen pharmacy for up to 12 hours, hoping to get medicine. Brenda Figueroa has come to get her grandmother's repeat prescription filled after other chemists turned her away.
I'm trying to get her refilled so she can keep taking her pills, and well, right now we can't because there's no system and they won't. We went to 3 different Walgreens. And then they don't have systems. They told me that they could give them to me here in this one, but the situation right now is that they can't, so.
Miriam Rodriguez came to San Juan to retire, almost 2 weeks after Hurricane Maria wreaked havoc. Like tens of thousands of others, her home is still without power.
My mother is doing well. She's better than me because she has air conditioning. She has a home in San Lorenzo, but this is a very disaster. I have no water. And I'm not buying food because I don't have a generator. My husband has de sueño. I don't know how I get a machine to have some air in my home. But I want to tell my family in Chicago that we're doing well, but it's very disastrous because this is the first time I'm crying. I haven't cried for a long time.
30 minutes drive from San Juan, residents were still in clean-up mode. Orlando Mia said authorities hadn't cleared the streets or checked if basic survival needs were being met. He said the US government had the military forces, personnel and equipment, but the US territory was still without power and a sewerage system. US President Donald Trump came under fire from San Juan Mayor Carmen Yuen Cruz over the weekend after she accused his administration of being too slow to respond in what she says is a fast-developing humanitarian crisis.
I am begging anyone that can hear us to save us from dying. If anybody out there is listening to us, we are dying, and you are killing us with the inefficiency.
Ms. Cruz said while private donations of food and water were pouring in, little support had come in from the US government, and what had was slow. Mr. Trump fired back, citing the US territory's debt problem and saying people from Puerto Rico wanted everything done for them.
Ultimately, the government of Puerto Rico will have to work with us to determine how this massive rebuilding effort will end up being one of the biggest ever, will be funded and organized, and what we will do with the tremendous amount of existing debt.
US Senator Marco Rubio urged an end to the political finger-pointing.
Every minute we spend in the political realm bickering with one another over who's doing what or who's wrong
or who didn't do right is a minute of energy and time that we're not spending trying to get the response right. And so I think when this is all said and done, we're going to have time to stop and look back and say, should things have done differently? I think everyone involved in the response has things they could have done better. But right now, I hope we'll stay 100% focused on what needs to be done to get the people of Puerto Rico help. And then we'll have plenty of time in the future to have these debates about who didn't do the right thing or what could have been done better.
After spending the weekend at his golf course in New Jersey, Donald Trump is expected to visit Puerto Rico this week. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Spain is facing its deepest political crisis in decades after Catalonians went ahead with a banned referendum which ended in violent clashes and an overwhelming vote in favour of independence. Riot police on orders from the capital, Madrid, tried to close down polling stations across the northern region of Catalonia, attacking voters with batons and firing rubber bullets. The Spanish government had warned separatists and regional authorities to stop the poll, and Spain's Prime Minister maintains the referendum is illegal and did not actually take place. Those in favour of it say the overwhelming result gives them the right to seek independence. The BBC's Tom Burridge was following the events in Barcelona.
This is how a vote turned ugly. Spanish National Police moving in to disrupt an independence referendum in Catalonia, which Spain's government considers illegal. People kicked and thrown. Women literally pulled by their hair out of polling stations. Across Barcelona, violent police raids to grab ballot boxes. Hundreds injured when they went to vote.
One of the policemen take him from the head, take out the glasses, and then he started to kick my dad.
I am 79, Maria Teresa told me. I just wanted to vote in peace. But it wasn't just in Barcelona. To the north, in Girona. After clearing people from the entrance to the polling station, they smashed their way in. Other officers from Spain's national force fought with local Catalan firemen. Some of Catalonia's own regional police on the side of voters, emotions running high. With some in Barcelona supporting Spain's government today, Spain's Prime Minister tonight seemed oblivious to the violence carried out by his police.
We've been an example to the world for our ability to believe in ourselves and to improve at every moment.
But many did vote, savouring a precious moment. But in a neighbourhood near Barcelona Football Club's new camp, we found Spanish police. Surrounding a polling station, local people surrounded them. Once inside the school, they removed protesters and searched for ballot boxes. Beth Nola was queuing to vote when they arrived.
We don't want to be part of this country, that they don't love us. Spain doesn't love us.
Their work done, they left, to a chorus of anger and disbelief.
The people facing down the police, riot police who have been drafted in from other parts of Spain. But their heavy-handed tactics today appear to be making deep divisions in this region worse.
Many Catalans did not want today's disputed poll, let alone independence. But Spain's now ruling Popular Party helped scrap a deal promising more financial autonomy for Catalonia. That was 7 years ago, and the pro-independence camp have pushed the idea that this region would be better off outside of Spain ever since.
That's the BBC's Tom Burridge. The Green Party has been in Parliament for 21 years, and whilst it's had deals in the past with both National and Labour, none of its MPs have ever held a ministerial post. None. With talk swirling about whether or not the Greens should explore going into coalition with National, most of that talk coming from National Party supporters, our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell looks back at what the party has achieved despite never having had a seat at the Cabinet table.
In 1999, it was the special votes that got the Greens over the 5% threshold and won Jeanette Fitzsimons the Coromandel electorate seat. During that term of Parliament, the Greens, with 7 MPs, supported the Labour Alliance government with confidence in supply, although the then co-leader Jeanette Fitzsimons says it was never written down as the Alliance did not want to admit it existed.
But we did work it through with Labour, and I remember things like stopping the logging of old growth forests on the west coast, the moratorium on genetic engineering until we'd had an inquiry, a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the impacts of genetic engineering on New Zealand. There was the shifting of some transport funding out of roads into rail and public transport. Some of those things were actually quite big.
The Green Party also won a number of small budget allocations under Labour, with the total through that term almost $55 million. The Greens did not have a support deal with Labour in 2002, but Jeanette Fitzsimons says in 2005 it abstained on matters of confidence in supply in exchange for positions for the co-leaders that were like cabinet positions but didn't have the title or the funding.
So, for example, I was asked to run the government's program on energy efficiency and solar energy campaign for households. Rod was asked to run a Buy New Zealand Made, Buy Kiwi Made program, and he did for the next 2 weeks until he died tragically. But Sue Bradford took that one over, and we got changed through in those 2 areas.
The Greens have been very successful at getting members' bills passed, including Jeanette Fitzsimons' Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which set up the Crown entity ECA. A law giving 16 and 17-year-olds the same rate of pay as other employees was also passed, along with the Flexible Working Hours Law, a law allowing mothers to keep their babies in prison with them until they're 2 years old, and the Clean Slate Act, which was adapted from Nandor Tansosh's members' bill. The former MP, Sue Bradford, had 3 bills passed, the most famous of which was the repeal of Section 59 of the Crimes Act, the so-called anti-smacking law. She managed to get broad political support for the 2007 law change and told Parliament at the time it was a difficult process.
Nick Smith said earlier on that parents should be grateful that most of us in this Parliament have found a way through where we can all support this bill today. He's right about that, but I'd just like to say that I think the children of this country will be even more grateful.
When National took office in 2008, it signed a memorandum of understanding with the Greens, where the 2 parties worked together on the home insulation scheme, energy efficiency and the regulation of natural health products. In 2011, the deal was renewed, with the then Prime Minister John Key keen to take it up a notch and discuss a deal where the Greens would abstain from voting on matters of confidence and supply. But the Greens co-leader at the time, Mitiria Ture, said they weren't keen.
The fact is that government has been formed. They have a sufficient majority to be government over the next term, and it's not expected that we would be entering into abstention discussions. And I think it was good to just get that clear from the outset, and I'm glad that he was able to raise that with us. In order to have a constructive relationship with other politicians, you need to be able to talk about these issues very plainly, and it was good that we could have that conversation.
The MOU that term saw National and the Greens work together again on home insulation, but also to clean up several toxic sites around the country and on the National Cycle Trails network. But John Key canned the deal before the 2014 election.
We have genuinely worked on some good things together. I mean, home insulation, cycleways and things were important initiatives that we worked on together. But in the course of having that MOU, we had some considerable discussions with the Greens. And I think what came out at the end of it was the Greens don't want to be with National.
Jeanette Fitzsimons says by her count there are more than 100 items and initiatives where the Greens have produced positive change in Parliament, and she believes for a small party the Greens have always punched above their weight, and whether they help form part of the next government or not will continue to do so. A te witi whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
O.J. Simpson has been freed from jail after serving 9 of 33 years for armed robbery. He'd previously, of course, been acquitted of killing his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goodman. This report from CNN begins with Simpson's attorney, Malcolm LaVerge.
He is extremely excited. I've never heard his voice so positive and upbeat. He's looking forward to the simple pleasures in life. Just fresh seafood, fresh steak. Wants to get out and see his family. He really is. He has a very, very optimistic attitude towards all of this. Been in jail for almost a decade now. light at the end of the tunnel. He's there, so it's very, very nice to hear his voice that way.
For the first time in nearly a decade, O.J. Simpson is a free man.
He's had perfect performance in prison, and that's a tough place to be, but he's had perfect performance there.
Simpson was convicted in 2008 of kidnapping, armed robbery, and 10 other charges after he and a group of men robbed 2 sports memorabilia dealers at gunpoint. The one-time NFL great became America's most well-known prisoner. Famously acquitted for the 1994 murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman.
He truly is remorseful, and we just want him to come home so that we can move forward for us.
In July, the Nevada Board of Parole Commissioners unanimously voting to grant the 70-year-old parole. A source close to Simpson says he'll start his life outside of prison in Las Vegas, but eventually moving to Florida to be closer to his children.
Right now, I'm at a point in my life where all I want to do is spend time with as much time as I can with my children and my friends.
I have no doubt he's going to have perfect performance on parole. He'll comply with anything that his Florida parole officer tells him to do. I have every confidence he's going to be very successful on parole.
So O.J. Simpson's lawyer ending that report from CNN. It's coming up to 6 o'clock after the news. Quite a remarkable story about a garden in prison.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. A witness has described rescuing screaming children from a fire inside a derelict building in Hastings. One child is in a critical condition and the other in a serious condition after the fire, which broke out this afternoon in a vacant former bar in the suburb of St Leonards. Adriana Webber reports.
The witness says rescuers had to use a ladder to get into the burning building. He says the rescuers, or workers from a nearby building, had to remove a grate in order to enter and save the 2 children. One child was extremely badly burned, according to the traumatised witness, who did not wish to be named. 3 of the rescuers are in hospital being treated for smoke inhalation. Central Fire Shift Commander Mike Wanoa says the fire is now out and the police and a fire investigator are trying to determine the cause. However, he has ruled out hazardous substances being at the site. This is Adriana Webber.
Thousands of people evacuated from the volcanic Vanuatu island of Ambai are struggling in fierce heat with limited food, water and shelter. About 3,500 arrived on neighbouring Espiritu Santo overnight, bringing the total number of evacuees there to close to 5,000. Father William, who's at one of the Santo camps, told Checkpoint help is desperately needed.
We don't have enough food, we don't have enough tent, and a lot of children outside in the sun because they don't have tent or camps to live in. And we don't have enough water also.
Father William says thousands more evacuees are still to arrive at the centre he's at. The Acting Secretary-General of Sanma Province, Prosper Bulatari, says no funding or support of any kind has come from the National Disaster Management Office and international assistance is needed as soon as possible. The Education Council says relieving teachers should have full certification. Since 2015, the Council has required teachers who have not gained full registration within 6 years of finishing their training to do a $4,000 course. They can also work towards registration through a mentoring program with their school. Relievers aged in their 60s have told RNZ News the rules ignore their decades of experience in the classroom and they do not want permanent teaching jobs. However, the council says all teachers should be fully certificated to ensure students are being taught by high-quality teachers. The British airline Monarch has collapsed, leaving 110,000 passengers stranded overseas. The British government has asked the Civil Aviation Authority to charter more than 30 aircraft to bring them home in what would be the country's biggest peacetime repatriation operation. 300,000 future bookings have been cancelled now that Britain's 5th biggest carrier has ceased trading and gone into administration. Monarch had been in last-ditch talks about renewing its licence to sell package holidays. 2 young women accused of using a nerve agent to kill Kim Jong-nam, the estranged half-brother of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, have pleaded not guilty to his murder. They've appeared in the High Court in Malaysia, as the BBC's Jonathan Head reports.
These two young women, this Indonesian and this Vietnamese woman, say that they had been trained to carry out what they thought were televised pranks. And they're quite poor women. They don't have any particular background that would suggest they could have been involved in this assassination. They're simply arguing they didn't know. So this is all Malaysians have got to go on. They will bring expert witnesses to the trial as well as listening to the two women, but who we won't hear from are any of the North Koreans themselves. And so the actual details of the plot and how it was organised, I think that's something that may still elude us once the trial is over at the end of next month.
Jonathan Head reporting. Health officials say mourners at Tangi in Hawke's Bay might have the serious disease paratyphoid fever as the number of cases in the region rises to 10. The Hawke's Bay District Health Board says one Tangi was at Te Aranga Marae in Flaxmere between August the 28th and 30th. The other was at Tangoio Marae, north of Napier, between September the 11th and 13th. Some patients have required care at Hawke's Bay Hospital and one needed treatment in Auckland. Some are known to have eaten mussels gathered from Napier's Ahuriri area. People with paratyphoid have fever, chills, headache and possibly a rash and severe vomiting and diarrhoea. Without treatment, it has a 10 to 15% mortality rate. A 6-year-old girl has been rescued uninjured after getting stuck 30 metres down a cliff on Waiheke Island. The police say she had climbed the rock face at Palm Beach this afternoon and was unable to get down from a precarious spot. Fire and emergencies set up a line rescue to reach the girl, who's since been reunited with her parents. It's 6:05. Sport. Lydia Ko is sure the New Zealand Women's Golf Open will continue to grow over the next few years. Canadian Brooke Henderson won the tournament today after it was forced into a 5th day because of bad weather. For the first time, the Open was sanctioned by the LPGA Tour, and Ko feels it's only going to get better.
This week has been pretty successful, where a lot of players, even more players that didn't come this year, will be able to come in the second time. And I think this is going to be a really cool spot for the girls, and hopefully throughout the years it'll keep getting better.
Lydia Ko finished tied for 22nd. The rugby community is mourning the loss of former All Black Peter Burke, who has died aged 90. Burke played 117 games for Taranaki and 12 for the All Blacks, including 3 tests in the 1950s. He coached the All Blacks in 1981 and 82. Meanwhile, the Springbok coach Alistair Coetzee has written off his side's chances of beating the All Blacks in their final rugby championship game in Cape Town this weekend. He says anyone expecting a rousing home win is, quote, living in a fool's paradise. The All Blacks beat the Springboks 57-0 in Albany a fortnight ago. And the New Zealand under-17 men's football team has completed its preparation for this month's World Cup in India with a 2-1 loss to England. That's the news.
This week on Night's Computer Science with Mark Appley, who's also been thinking about the prospects of robots taking our jobs. Charlotte MacDonald tells the story of the Imperial soldiers who came to Aotearoa to fight in the land wars of the 1860s. Will Flockton, this week's overseas correspondent, is on the line from the United Kingdom, no longer called the mother country. And this week's cultural ambassador Paul Barrington pumps up the volume for all you technophiles on Nights this week after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Vanuatu, including Coromandel, Taupo, Taumaranui and Taihape. Fine spells and a few showers. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Long fine spells, isolated showers during the afternoons and evenings, mainly inland. Westerly gales about southern Hawke's Bay and the Tararua district, easing tonight. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wellington, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, North and Central Otago, the place to be, fine weather. Bulla and Northern Westland, occasional showers, easing later tomorrow. Southern Westland, a few showers tonight or early tomorrow morning, then fine apart from the odd shower about the ranges. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers becoming confined to Fiordland and coastal Southland by evening and becoming mostly fine elsewhere. Westerly gales about the coast easing this afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's return now to the story that has been unfolding throughout the afternoon. 2 children in hospital, one of them, we're told, in a critical condition after a large fire in Hastings this afternoon. The fire broke out at a derelict former bar in the suburb of St Leonards. Nigel Hall is the Fire Services Assistant Area Commander and joins us now live. Thank you so much for joining us. This must have been a really stressful event for your crews. But some members of the public got in before the crews arrived. They managed to rescue the children. Is that your understanding of what occurred?
Yes, we do understand the surrounding business occupiers went into the building, putting themselves at some danger and pulled one of the young people out.
Yeah, which is a pretty heroic thing to do, isn't it? And had they not done that, that child would have been in very serious danger.
Well, we don't know that for sure, but more than likely, yes.
Yeah. It's very early to say, but have you any idea what caused the fire?
Well, we know that 3 young people were involved, and we know it's a tragic circumstances that's caused this fire. We don't know the actual circumstances, all the events that led up to the fire, but It was a derelict building, and there was no other source of ignition.
So the youngsters were doing something that set the fire off.
Well, we don't know that for sure yet. We are investigating. We've got our senior investigators down at the scene, and we've got police are down at the scene as well. But there was no one else involved, and it was a derelict building. So.
Have there been fires there previously? There's some reports that this is not the first fire there.
Yeah, in the sports bar about 6 months ago, there was a fire in that building. The building has been derelict since then. The actual building was to the rear of the sports bar, which is a sort of a derelict wooden and construction building.
Right, okay. And so once the fire took it burned very, very fast. By the time your crews, I think you had up to 30 firefighters there, right? And it was a really big fire when they arrived, was it?
Yeah, well, we were there very quickly. It's probably only a quarter of a mile from the fire station.
Oh, right.
And immediately on arrival, our officers made an assessment and made it second and quite quickly a third alarm, because originally we didn't know where the young people were. So we saturated the building quite early on, searching, put 8 BA crews into the building, trying to locate the young people. Only one was out at that time. But so it was quite big. It went up to a third alarm for us, which is about 30 firefighters.
Right. Forgive me for going into the details. There were 3 young people inside. One is in a critical condition in hospital, we understand, and I'm not sure that you can elaborate on that. That's for us to talk to the hospital about. What happened to the other 2, as far as you know? We believe that one of them, he fled the scene, and we later located him. Yep. And he had suffered minor burns. And the third young person, we believe that was involved, he done a runner as such, so we established that he wasn't. Okay, gosh, that's good news that he got out anyway. What sort of age, roughly what sort of age group are we talking about? We believe they were 10, 8 and 7. Oh, really, little kids? Oh, this is a heartbreaking story. And what's the mix? What's the mix of volunteers and professionals by the time you've got a third call out? This is quite heavy stuff for people to be dealing with, isn't it? Yeah, there's nothing more tragic for our firefighters to be involved in, and young people being involved in an event like this. So they will take it hard, but at the same time, our thoughts will be going out to the families that have been involved in this event. Well, Nigel, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being available this evening. That's tough work for your crews. Nigel Hall is the Fire Services Assistant Area Commander, joining us live. Those children, 10, 8 and 7, he thinks. Authorities on the Vanuatu island of Umbai fear they may have underestimated the number of people who need to evacuate the threat of volcanic eruption by as many as 4,000. With the island's Monaro volcano threatening a full-scale eruption, it's believed as many as 15,000 people will need to be evacuated from the island before Friday. Now, earlier in the program tonight, we spoke to Radio NZ international reporter Koroi Hawkins at an evacuation centre on the island of Espiritu Santo. Koroi told us there's a desperate shortage of tents and shelter from the very hot sun, and whilst women and children were considered a priority, there was no respite from the heat for some people at all. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with a priest on the island of Santo. Father William told me he had just over 1,000 people in a camp, but that was expected to swell to 5,000. I asked Father William what he would say to the aid agencies.
Yeah, we because the population of this island is about 11,000 Ambayan people who left the island yesterday and yet still to be coming, and we need some help. We need some help, and we really need help.
And what help do you need most of all? What do you need most of all?
Most of all, we need assistance of food, tent, water, medicine.
Medicines. Are people starting to get sick?
Yes, because there are so much people, and mostly children starting to get sick because there's not enough room for everyone.
There's a long interview with Karoy Hawkins, our correspondent at that camp, which is online now. New Zealand have wrapped up a successful rowing world champs in Florida. I say, changing the subject, utterly coming away with 7 medals, 3 of them gold. The men's and women's doubles sculls both won gold today, matching the gold won by the women's pair of Grace Prendergast and Kerry Gowler yesterday. John Story and Chris Harris pipped the bowlers crew for gold in the men's double, while Brooke Donoghue and Olivia Lowe enjoyed a 1.5 second winning margin. This has been a really great regatta for the crews. The women's 8 also bronze. The women's 8 also won bronze, leaving New Zealand second on the overall medal table behind Italy. The only disappointing note on the final day of competition was the single sculler, Robbie Manson, who earlier this year set a world best time in his event, but could only manage 5th. Rowing New Zealand high performance manager Alan Cotter told sports editor Stephen Houston the campaign is a morale booster after the really disappointing medal tally, relatively speaking, at the Rio Olympics.
We're really happy with what's happened and the way we've progressed from Rio, where we only got 3 medals and we're after 5, and 3 fourth places didn't help. So, you might as well come out the back door with the 3 4 places that we had in Rio. But the athletes have come together well over the summer. The coaches have done a great job. Support team. It's worked really well, and the athletes, the young athletes, have stepped up in new combinations, and we'll just keep working away and chipping away as we go through to Tokyo.
Has the success come where you expected it to?
Yes, we do a lot of testing back home in the winter. We had a good European campaign, so the crews were showing speed, but it's just when you come to these regattas, it's a pressure. You don't know what your competitors are doing as far as their speed and what improvements they're doing. You can only control what we're doing, and everybody stepped up well.
What's particularly pleased you about it?
It was a great team. We've been here for over 2 weeks, and everybody's gelled together, the coaches, the support staff, the athletes. Everything's gone well, even, the organising committee here with the hurricane going through, and we arrived and there was no infrastructure up, like the tents that are all up and the grandstand. So it's been a happy team.
Because you're at I suppose, quite a sort of watershed, really, aren't you, for rowing New Zealand? You've lost some of the big names of the past few years. So it's sort of is there very much a sense of new beginnings? You've got to have a development program going, and we've got a good under 18, under 19 and under 21 and under 23 development pathway. And that's what you've got to do, the hard yards at that level and success at that level to do it at the top. So it's good to see the young athletes that have been in the program a little while coming through the development program, now getting success at the elite level. Robbie Manson, I suppose, disappointment there, given he set that world best time earlier this year and he's had success in the World Cup.
Yeah, no, it was, and Robbie, he's sort of had his good rows here, and he'll be back. It's just that we had 4 or 5 weeks out and straight after Europe, that didn't help. I'm not making excuses for him, but when you have that time out of the boat, it is hard to come back when you've got, world-class scullers around like Cynic, who's chased mahi and beaten mahi along the way. So he was okay after the race. He would have liked to have done better, of course, but that's what it is. And you move on, and we start rowing again in a couple of weeks' time back at Carapero.
That's Rowing New Zealand's High Performance Manager Alan Cotton talking to Stephen Hewson. The Spanish region of Catalonia has voted overwhelmingly for independence, defying police who tried to shut down polls and fired rubber bullets at protesters. More than 800 people were injured. More than 2 million people voted in the referendum, with 90% of votes cast in favour of independence. The referendum has been ignored by the Spanish government, which refuses to even acknowledge it took place. The ABC's Angus Randall reports the Spanish government is facing huge criticism for the scale and violence of the police response. And meanwhile, well, the Catalans now say they are on the threshold of independence.
Footage has emerged of police in riot gear pushing voters down a flight of stairs, kicking those forced to the ground, and in one incident pulling a woman by her hair. The Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, blames the violence squarely on the vote organisers.
They knew the referendum was illegal, unfair and impossible, but they decided to go ahead with it, promoting a real attack against the rule of law and the democratic model without caring about anything and anybody. This was a premeditated, conscious attack to which the state responded firmly and serenely. The referendum, which wanted to annul the Spanish constitution and make a part of our country independent without asking the opinion of all the Spanish people, simply has not existed.
In a move likely to increase tensions in the region, the Prime Minister has thanked authorities for their efforts.
De manera muy especial, they've done their job with their mandate from justice. It would have been easier for all to look away while such a serious attack was underway against the rule of law, but they didn't. They all responded with loyalty, with their commitment to democracy and the rule of law.
Today's vote has no official weight. Spain's constitutional court ruled the poll illegal, and police have confiscated ballot boxes in violent raids across the region. Many Catalans voted more than once by travelling to different polling places, fearing their vote would be taken by Spanish authorities. Despite this, the Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, is claiming a legitimate victory.
On this day of hope and suffering, Catalonia's citizens have earned the right to have an independent state in the form of a republic. Hence, my government, in the next few days, will send the results of today's vote to the Catalan Parliament, where the sovereignty of our people lies, so that it can act in accordance with the law of the referendum.
Dr. Carlos Uxo lectures in Spanish studies at Monash University. He predicts today's vote will cause further division between Catalonia and the rest of Spain.
The Catalan government is saying that most probably they will declare independence. Catalonia will be an independent state. That will be a declaration. The Spanish Prime Minister, on the other hand, has said that they are very happy how the situation was handled, that the referendum did actually not take place, and we are just going to have more of the same. So there are two sides that are being more polarised each day.
It's not the first referendum the region has held on independence, with today marking the fourth unofficial vote held in the past 8 years. But for those determined to leave Spain, today's result marks a turning point in their battle for independence.
Tomorrow is the first day of our freedom. They cannot stop this. Not the Spanish police, not the national police, nor the army. The Catalan people are determined to have its independence, and we will achieve it. They will not stop it. There is no time machine to turn back time. It is irreversible. Spain, see you later.
That report from the ABC's Angus Randall. 2 young women have been stabbed to death at Marseille's main train station in a suspected terrorist attack. Soldiers on guard at the station shot dead the attacker, who police described as of North African appearance. This report from the BBC's Hugh Schofield.
It was early afternoon on the esplanade in front of the main railway station in Marseille. A man seated on a bench drew out a large knife, rose and attacked 2 young women. They were aged 17 and 20. Both were knifed to death.
We were in the train station. I was taking out my ticket, and then we heard a woman screaming outside, running in. I particularly remember the women because they were the ones screaming. People were running, but no one knew what was going on.
A military patrol was in the station and the 3 soldiers rushed to the scene. The man turned against them, shouting Allahu Akbar, at which point they shot him and he died shortly after. President Macron said in a tweet that he was outraged by this barbarous act. His heart went out to the families and friends of the victims, and he saluted the soldiers and police who'd acted with cool efficiency. Police are treating it as a terrorist attack, but there are plenty of question marks about the man and his motivation.
The individual was killed by a soldier this afternoon. It seems that this individual had several identities. I don't know any more, and I cannot say more than that.
French media report that the killer was in his 20s with a police record for petty offences. If so, that fits in with a steady pattern of recent attacks in France, carried out by individuals who seem to have a deep hatred of French authority, aggravated by exposure to Islamist ideas.
Hugh Schofield reporting from Paris. 24 minutes past 6, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Gay and lesbian couples across Germany have been tying the knot today as a new marriage equality law comes into effect. The laws give same-sex couples the same rights as heterosexual couples. And 2 men in Berlin who met 38 years ago were the first to exchange their vows. The BBC's Damien McGuinness has the details.
They've been together since 1979. But it wasn't until today that Bodo Mender and Karl Kreiler were finally able to get married. The 2 men became Germany's first same-sex couple to tie the knot on Sunday morning in the Berlin district of Schöneberg.
It is, of course, incredibly satisfying that we could sign this marriage certificate. It is a historical step, and we are very happy.
I would say overjoyed. It all worked out in the end after a very long battle. 38 years. They could have done that a bit faster. I really need to say that.
The city's mayor described the first weddings as historic. But there are critics, including among Conservative politicians, who say equal marriage goes against the constitution and within the leadership of Germany's Catholic Church. Catholic lay groups, though, are calling for more tolerance from church leaders, while Germany's Protestant church has no objections to equal marriage. In June, after growing pressure from voters and left-wing rivals, Chancellor Angela Merkel unexpectedly allowed the German parliament a free vote on equal marriage. It passed, and today, across the country, gay and lesbian couples are now exchanging vows for the first time.
Damien McGuinness reporting from Berlin. 26 minutes past 6 now. A garden project created by prisoners at Auckland Prison in Palermo is set to feature at this year's New Zealand Flower and Garden Show. The feature garden is based around the prisoners' road back to redemption. Te Mano Korehi reporter John Boynton has more.
There's a clear blue sky at the nursery of Auckland Prison in Palermo, which is nicely hidden from the endless line of metal gates surrounding the facility. The impressive nursery is where trees, plants and flowers are being grown for the garden show. Auckland Prison Manager of Industries David Greer says prisoners' self-worth and confidence grow under these projects.
They're not specifically commercially focused, so the outcomes are sort of more social outcomes for us, and it's a great chance for us to show off the skill set and the amazing ability that some of these men have. If you don't want it, no worries.
Mr. Greer says prisoners pick up horticultural qualifications and the chance to learn skills they can use once back in the community.
I find that the idea that prisoners don't care about anything is not true. Some people have got this idea that because they're prisoners they no longer care, and I've found that that's not actually true. Many of them still have deep connections to their own whānau.
In the prison workshop, prisoners are working on different elements of the garden design. Prisoner A has skills in weaving and Māori craft and is helping to make the centrepiece of the garden a woven seating area.
So it represents a kohanga or a nest, which is symbolic of the whānau setting, and hence the reason why it's been woven. Each strand is like the strand of the whānau, coming together, working together, being woven together. Without those relationships within a whānau, we as prisoners, or we as people cannot succeed.
Prisoner B is creating metal tea cocoa trees out of old exhaust pipes.
pretty good, yeah. Picking up a whole new style of work, so I'm used to just doing bins, and this is a complete different other style, so it's pretty good, yeah. The main hard bit is the bark, yeah. The bark feature, just non-stop welding, stop, start, yeah.
Redemption is the main theme of the garden, and I asked prisoners what they thought about this.
It's a good question. Forgiving oneself, first and foremost, and moving on with life. I mean, you can't right the wrongs. We can't right our wrongs, but we can try.
We cannot turn the clock back and reverse what we've done. That's history. But we can try our best to give a little bit back to society in the form of helping with these projects and putting our effort and labour and energy into it.
Adam Shooter designed the garden and had input from prisoners. Mr. Shooter says he saw them develop as a project gathered momentum.
When we first started doing it, there's a few other guys into it, but every week they're kind of like a few more and a few more, giving a hand, and they're right into it. Yeah, you see the passion of them, I can see the change in their faces.
The garden will feature native plants, illusion panels and a reflective pond. Mr. Shooter says the garden features various paths reflecting the journey prisoners make on their way out of prison.
And they can either go two ways: the easy way, back to jail, or with family support and that, they can succeed.
The garden will be on display this November in Auckland at the New Zealand Flower and Garden Show. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko John Boynton aho.
With that lovely report from John Boynton, we end Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your company. On behalf of our excellent and hard-working team, we do hope to see you tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. 2 children are in hospital, one with critical burns and the other with minor burns, after a fire in a derelict building in the Hastings suburb of St Leonards. 3 children, believed to be 10, 8 and 7, were in the building. The 3 men who broke into the former sports bar with a ladder to rescue them were also taken to hospital with smoke inhalation. Thousands of people evacuated from the Vanuatu island of Ambai ahead of a feared full-scale volcanic eruption, are struggling in fierce heat with limited food, water and tents. And teachers who have made a career out of relief work are unhappy with Education Council requirements to update their training at a cost of $4,000 for some. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Worlds of Music is a world music program with a difference. Every week we present an eclectic mix of